played a lot of The Unknown recently. Just look at my recent video catalog. And after playing The Unknown an ungodly amount, I began to get a pretty good idea of just how good he is when compared to every other killer in Dead by Daylight. So, with all that said, please sit back, relax, and enjoy my breakdown of The Unknown, his strengths, his weaknesses, and everything in between. So, the most logical place, at least in my mind, to start with The Unknown is his perks. The Unknown has 3 teachable perks like every other killer in this game. So, the first perk we're going to be talking about is Undone, a perk which uses a token system. And it goes up to 30 tokens, which to my knowledge, there is no other token system that goes anywhere near that high, but either way, carrying on, each token represents 1% gen regression and 1 second of that gen block. So in theory, you can have 30 seconds of gen regression, or 30% of gen regression, and you can have 30 seconds of that generator being blocked. In order to get these tokens, survivors have to fail skill checks, which kind of plays into the biggest weakness of Undone as a perk, is the fact that it generally doesn't get much value because it completely relies upon the survivors completely sucking at the game. Even the worst of survivors, like I'm talking survivors who got Dead by Daylight for Christmas, usually they don't fail any more than 3-4 skill checks a game. So absolute best case scenario, you're gonna maybe have 12 tokens before you get to use this perk. And honestly, that's not a lot of value. I mean, it's basically just a worse version of Pop Goes the Weasel, if I'm being totally honest. Generally speaking, a perk that relies upon survivors being stupid is usually itself a bad perk, especially when there's just so many infinitely better alternatives. So, with all that said, I think Undone is a pretty bad perk. I think it's honestly one of the worst gen regression perks in the entire game. Not the worst, but it's definitely not great. So overall, Undone, you get a 3 out of 10 stars. Moving on. The next perk we're going to be talking about is Unbound. This perk, in order to be activated, requires you to hit a survivor. When the perk is activated, you can vault a whopping 5% faster. Well, to be more specific, you get 5% haste, so you move 5% faster for 10 seconds. Wow, that's amazing. Similar to Undone, this perk relies upon the survivors completely screwing up in order for you to actually get value. Now, granted, unlike kicking generators or failing skill checks, hitting a survivor, that's obviously a lot more controllable on the killer's behalf, but either way, it's still a perk that requires survivor input to be activated, which is just not ideal. Even when you do activate the perk, and even when you do hit a survivor, the value you actually get out of this perk is extremely negligible. I mean, 5% speed boost lasting 10 seconds. I mean, that's not great. Not to mention this perk relies upon survivors being hit in a scenario where vaulting is actually convenient, which most of the time it's not, and even when it is viable, I mean, the survivor still gets more value from vaulting, even if you have this perk, compared to when you vault and you get 5% speed boost. I mean, it's kind of a lose-lose situation, and honestly, I wouldn't mind this perk as much if the actual buff was significant. Like, say it was like 20% or like 10% for like longer. Sure, this is a solid perk, but 5% haste for 10 seconds? That's garbage. I'm sorry, that's terrible. Unless you have a build that is specifically designed around vaulting, this perk is just not going to do you much good. So overall, I think this perk is going to get a 4 out of 10. Is it better than Undone? Absolutely, but it's not great. And like I said, unless you have a build specifically designed around this perk, it's just not going to do you a whole lot of good. So, the Unknown is down 2-0. He has swung twice and has completely and utterly whiffed the ball. And let's see how this last swing goes. And it's out of the park. Okay, wow. Unforeseen is an absolutely diabolical perk. And I love it. What this perk does is every time you kick a generator, your terror radius gets transferred to said generator. And in the meantime, you become undetectable, which means you can just kind of sneak around the map and they have no idea where that you are. You want to know what I love about this perk more than anything? Actually, you know what? Let me back up. You know what's better than having a survivor not know where you are? It's a survivor thinking they know where you are, and you're actually somewhere else. Just imagine you're the poor survivor who hears a terror radius, you'll walk away and you're thinking, oh man, I'm so happy. And then this absolute abomination pops out of a bush and just whacks you over the head with a fire axe. Not a fun time.
Oh, I think
shit.
he did.
Oh yeah, the stealth got him, I can tell. He was not ready for that one. Okay. And I gotta say, as the unknown player, it's so satisfying every single time. Whether it's smacking a survivor who's not looking at me, whether it's yoinking them off a generator. I mean, it honestly never gets old. It's absolutely diabolical. And it's amazing. However, I think the biggest thing that differentiates it from the other two perks I've mentioned today is the fact that it doesn't rely upon survivor error. It relies upon the killer actually being smart. And here's a good rule of thumb. Perks that rely upon the killer being smart are generally a lot more fun and balanced than perks that rely upon the survivors being stupid. Because what that does is it enables the killer to be a little bit more crafty and the survivors to be a little bit more cautious. Which personally is just something I can really, really appreciate. So you might be thinking, what am I going to rank it out of 10? Well, I think it gets a 7.5. While I absolutely love this perk, it can be countered by, well, one thing that's pretty self-explanatory. 2 functional eyes. If the survivors are paying any attention to you, like if they're just looking around while they're working on a generator, they're going to see it coming. I mean, you're not exactly conspicuous or inconspicuous at all. I mean, look at this thing. You're going to see that thing coming at you from a mile away. So if the survivors have functional eyes, yeah, they're probably going to see you, unless you start using cover, but that's a whole nother debate for a whole other day. The point is, the perk is very counterable. Even if you're very careful with how you approach survivors, they're going to see you. However, you're pretty much guaranteed to get value because by the time they do see you, you're probably going to be within striking distance and you're pretty much guaranteed a free hit at that point, assuming you play it well. So overall, I think this perk is a 7.5. It's an evil perk. It's a wonderful perk. And honestly, the amount of times I've yoinked someone off a generator or gotten a free hit because of this perk, quite frankly, is more than you'd probably believe. So overall, great perk, 7.5 out of 10. Moving on. Now that we've established the Unknown's perks are meh, I mean, we have a 3 out of 10 perk, a 4 out of 10 perk, and a 7 out of 10 perk, which isn't great, if I'm being totally honest. That's a pretty lackluster average. So let's talk about, the character you're actually here for. The man, the myth, the abomination, the unknown. So, specifically, we are going to talk about UVX first. Now, I'm just going to be honest, straight up, just completely blunt, UVX as a power is not that good. Is it bad? No. Is it great? Also, no. Now, before you get out your pitchforks and torches and shovels and whatever it is you use to, mob people, I guess, let me explain myself a little bit here. So before I give you my explanation, I'm going to explain a little bit more in depth about how UVX actually works. There are 2 stages of UVX. First, you need to infect your target, and to do that, you just need to hit them for the first time. Then, if you want them to get injured, you need to hit them again. Think about how Nemesis infection works. It's basically the exact same principle. The only difference is the infection status effect wears off by itself if you are looking at the unknown, somewhere within the range of 15 to 20 seconds. The reason why there's a bit of a gap in there because there's no universal time it takes for the effect to wear off. In order for the effect to wear off, the infection, you need to stare at the unknown for 10 seconds, and some survivors, in theory, can just stare at him for 10 seconds straight, whatever. However, the average is probably closer to like 15 to 20 seconds because usually survivors have to stare at other things apart from the killer for 10 straight seconds, like, pallets or, make sure they don't run into stuff, that sort of thing. So we're going to be generous and say it takes about 15 to 20 seconds to cleanse yourself of the infected status effect. The reason why this is such a massive weakness is because the unknown takes 7 seconds to fire a shot. So let me lay out a scenario for you, okay? You fire your UVX, you hit your target, great. The UVX cooldown is 7 seconds. The time to cleanse the infection is 10 seconds. Meaning, worst case scenario, the survivor looks at you for 10 seconds, they're cleansed, and you have a 3-second window to fire a second shot of UVX and hit them. which is extremely hard to do. Because it relies upon A, you have to make sure you're still in a chase the survivor. B, you have to have an angle on the survivor. And C, the survivor can't evade it anyway, because let's be honest, I mean, UVX hitting is just as much about your aim as it is about the survivor's competency. So, let's be generous. Let's just say that it's not 10 seconds. Let's say it's 15, like I laid out earlier, which is probably a more accurate average. You have about 7 seconds to land a second shot. That may sound like a lot, but trust me, that flies right by. If you're chasing somebody, trust me, 7 seconds is going to feel like nothing. And if you miss your second shot, you're screwed. I mean, just straight up. If you infect someone with your first shot and you miss your second shot, you're not injuring them. And you have to redo the whole process all over again. And just to really add on to the UVX's questionable effectiveness, we got to talk about the UVX's hitbox. One of the things that really annoys me about UVX is its hitbox. Now, you'd think, with UVX, you hit somebody, they're infected, whatever. However, there is one really weird caveat with UVX I will never understand. You cannot hit the survivor directly. It has to be splash damage. And for those of you who need an example, I'm going to put token footage up on screen to demonstrate what I mean. If you hit the survivor in the face with UVX, you will not infect them. Which, I gotta say, that makes absolutely no sense at all. Heck, you even get blood points for it, but it just doesn't do anything. Like, the game literally is just taunting you at that point. It's so annoying. It'd be like if I had a grenade launcher and I lob a grenade in someone's mouth and they don't explode. It just doesn't, it doesn't compute. It does not make sense. Couple that with the fact that UVX hitbox, apart from just the obvious of, if you direct impact somebody, you don't infect them. The UVX hitbox is A, kind of small, and B, it's very, very janky at times. Like, I swear to God, there are some times where I feel like I am just nailing them in the face, and it just doesn't work. This isn't even mentioning the fact that UVX as an ability is kind of hard to use, and its like projectile bounce is pretty janky overall. So unless you're just absolutely cracked at the game, you're going to have a real tough time getting any UVX value. Not to say it's impossible, and I'm also not saying UVX is bad. It's just nowhere near as potent as, say, Nemesis Whip, which is like probably the easiest comparison I can make. And honestly, Nemesis Whip versus UVX, I could probably make a whole video dedicated to that. However, I just consider UVX just a slightly worse version of Nemesis Whip. So overall, I have to give UVX a 6 out of 10. Because to be honest, it's just not that good. Is it horrible? No. However, the fact that A, it's kind of hard to use, B, its hitbox is inconsistent, and C, it just has some weird rules. I just can't place anything higher than that. I think 6 out of 10 is a fair spot for it. So overall, I think his power is kind of Not great, not awful, just kind of there. So, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, so funny YouTuber man thinks that Unknown is actually kind of mid and not great. Yes, but also no. What makes the Unknown strong is not his perks, not his add-ons. It's one specific aspect that we need to talk about. All right, I'm just going to say it. Unknown's hallucinations are crazy. They are nuts. It is like it's basically Hag's power. It is literally a diet version of Hag's power in your back pocket. It's absolutely amazing. It's diabolical, I'd even say. Okay, Matt, picture a scenario for me, okay? Say you're on Greenwood, new map, right? You chase a survivor up by the theater. Then, you think to yourself, oh, a generator's almost done on the other side of the map. Let me take a look around. Oh, would you look at that? There's a hallucination way out in Narnia. Let me just teleport to that real quick. So you teleport over there, apply a bunch of pressure, then once you're done, you just teleport back. It's absolutely insane. I'd argue the hallucinations are one of the best special abilities in the entire game. I'd argue it's literally just a better version of Demogorgon's power. Straight up. I mean, not the shred, but his actual transport ability. It's nuts. It is absolutely insane. And if you try and, say, dispel a hallucination, you want to know what happens? The Unknown just sees that, oh, you're trying to dispel it? Wongo bongo, time to get an axe to the face, and that's exactly what he does. So, dispelling hallucinations are annoying. The Unknown has unparalleled map traversal, and there's really no good way for the survivors to deal with it. The only bad thing about hallucinations is you don't really control where they spawn. I mean, their spawn is essentially random. The only thing you can really control is, like, you can increase the odds of a hallucination spawning by just not kicking generators or performing, like, you know, killer actions like hooks and stuff. But beyond that, the hallucination spawns are pretty random. However, odds are if you chase someone on one side of the map and then you chase another person on the other side of the map, you're going to have two hallucinations on the opposite side of the map, which just give him absolutely insane map traversal. I mean, it's crazy. So with that said, I think his special ability or his little passive power is a 9 out of 10 ability. It is unironically the most powerful part of his kit. His perks, kind of bad. His power, slightly above mediocre. But his special ability, dear God, it's evil. It is single-handedly the sole reason why he is, like, actually pretty solid as a killer. With all that said, with all the factors in place, what do I think of the Unknown? What should you think of the Unknown? Well, here's my personal opinion on the whole thing. I think the Unknown's perks are pretty bad, barring Unforeseen, which is a god. Oh, no, I wouldn't say a god tier perk, but it's a good perk. His UVX is very flawed, not great. If you're good with it, you can do some pretty good work, but overall, it's a very flawed power. But his special ability is borderline insane. So when you compile all that together, I'd say you get a killer that's a total of, I don't know, 5.5 out of 10, 6 out of 10 killer. Yeah, I think 6 out of 10 feels right. And like I said, if you don't agree with me, whatever, okay? But I played the Unknown a fair bit, and I feel like this is a fair rating. I probably played about 100 games as the Unknown at this point. I've made like half a dozen videos on him at this point. I feel pretty comfortable with this ranking. I think 6 out of 10. I genuinely believe that's how strong he is. He's not bad, but he could definitely use a buff or two. Specifically for the UVX. His UVX, kind of weird. And his perks, specifically Undone. Undone is absolutely garbage. Don't use it. And you know what? I'm ranting. See, I'm just going to shut up now. If you guys end up enjoying the video, hit the like button, subscribe, do all the other typical YouTuber stuff. And on that note, stay strong, stay clear, Spitfire out.